Welcome to Journeys with Kai. Thank you, Jonathan and Ben, for joining me on my third episode. So Journeys with Kai is a podcast where I take two people I know that I consider like to have some sort of success at a young age, and then I pair them off with someone they usually, don't know too well, but I think they're sort of similar in some aspect in their success or in their like side interests. For you two, uh, and I know each of you like from varying degrees, but I definitely respect and admire both of your guys' ambition and accomplishment in sort of the corporate world, especially in like the tech industry. And I think both of you guys have lots of experience, especially for your age, at some like major companies and just sort of interesting positions at those companies. So with that in mind, could you guys just do a little intro about yourselves? You can start it whenever. Around college is usually a decent place to start, and then your professional experiences and all that. So Ben, do you want to go first?
Yeah, for sure. So, hey everyone, I'm Ben Sklar, and I went to Vanderbilt University, Vandy, and I double majored in computer science and MHS, which stands for Medicine, Health, and Society. And originally I thought that I was going to be a doctor. So I started off pre-med and then realized I didn't want to go to medical school, and I knew becoming a doctor would take a really long time. I, I just ultimately didn't want to go that path. So computer science became my primary major and focus, but I kept the MHS piece because I had already finished a lot of the requirements. So yeah, after that, I started looking for jobs, I guess, towards the end of school. And I was trying to figure out whether I wanted to be a software engineer or a product manager. And I realized that I really wanted to be a product manager. But breaking into product management is pretty difficult, and there aren't a whole lot of product management jobs, especially for new grads. So I was fully expecting to be a software engineer after college and then make the transition into product management. But I feel like I got really lucky. So I found a program at SAP, which is where I currently work, and they were doing a rotational program. And they had software engineers, they had designers, and they had data scientists as well as product managers for this rotational program. And I applied to be a product manager, and from the beginning they told me it was very unlikely because they were looking for people who had masters, people who had more experience, and that they were only hiring 3 product managers for this program, and they had like 3,000 applicants for it.
Holy cow.
So yeah, I feel like I got really lucky when it came to everything. And I got that job, and it was the only product manager like interview that I had coming out of college.
Wow.
That would actually interview me. I applied to some other programs like the Google program, the Facebook program, but I didn't get an interview there at all. So I had no chance at all. So and I got a few other positions to be a software engineer, but being a product manager was what I wanted to do. So yeah, I took that role at SAP, and I'm still at SAP as a product manager. I work at SuccessFactors, which is our SAP's cloud HXM platform. And I work on our recruiting software, which is kind of cool because everybody has to apply to a company before they get into it. So it's cool to be on the working on the recruiting software. Yeah. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely do a deeper dive. When I was, and just like a quick thing, when I was just applying for a new position, I did this 2-year rotational program in more of the software engineering space. But I was also looking at some product management jobs, and I was speaking to my brother-in-law's sister, who was a product manager, seeing how I could sort of make my resume more product managery than sort of techie. So yeah, I'll definitely go into that a little bit later. But yeah, Jonathan, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So hey guys, my name is Jonathan. I also went to Vanderbilt University. I majored in computer science and I had a minor in corporate strategy, which is basically business. And kind of differing from Ben, I kind of knew I was going into tech at like 15. So both my parents work in the tech space, so I was kind of always around it. And so I went to like an engineering high school, and my junior year I ended up taking, I think it was called computer integrated manufacturing. So got to see some like tech, like the tech side of kind of like the like the mechanical engineering type industry and area, and that was really cool. Just seeing kind of how tech works with like hardware, and so that kind of, I don't know, kind of made me interested in tech. And so by senior year, I basically was like, I want to major in computer science when I go to college. So when I got to Vandy, first year really, I started looking for a position. So my spring semester, I took the first CS course. I think it was intro to CS or intro to programming, or I don't know.
In Java, right?
Yeah, it was in Java. Yeah. So the intro class, I took that. And after that, I started applying to places, and I applied to several places, but I ended up landing at Deloitte in an internship. And so that first year I was in data management. So that was right after my freshman year. I was in data management. Yeah, it was cool. Just kind of seeing the ins and outs of, a big organization. I met a lot of people, networked with a lot of people. And that first year really wasn't too technical because, when you finish your first CS, right, you don't really know much. You think you do, but you really don't. So it was a lot of learning. And that was really cool just to kind of, get the hang of it. And so then I ended up interning that fall with another team where I did, it was at Deloitte as well in the finance area. So I did some Visual Basic Excel programming. It was a lot of like importing data from SQL into Excel for like finance teams to be able to kind of better track, I guess, where the money was going and kind of what was going on there. And I did that during the fall of my sophomore year. And then after that, I reapplied again to Deloitte. And next summer I came back and I ended
You're
up
a lifer, dude.
in operations. So and that was a great internship. It was really fun. I actually was automating user interfaces, and it was a great summer. Just learned a lot about how to make things better, how to implement software in a way that's going to make everyone's life easier. And I think that kind of made me like technology even more, because that's where like my passion lies, is just making people's lives easier with technology, or making protecting people with technology, doing things that just help people through that. And so after that summer, I ended up applying again, and then I came back the next summer, and I was actually in cybersecurity. So I was in technology risk management, and it was great just seeing how organizations operate from like a cybersecurity perspective, just seeing kind of how they, have these different standards that they have to meet that kind of help keep all their software secure, keep the system secure, and just make sure that everything's running smoothly, and that, basically we're not getting hacked. That's the big everything in cyber. So, after that summer, I kind of fell in love with cyber. So I was like, man, I really, really, really want to do this. I think this is where I want to take my career. So, I ended up getting an offer at the end of that summer. And the next summer, so after graduation, I graduated May 2019, CS degree. After graduation, I came back to Deloitte. I started in July. That's where I work now. I came in actually as a business analyst in cybersecurity. So I was basically helping cyber teams onboard their projects, making sure that, the project managers were, carrying the project in a way that was going to meet the client's requirements, basically. And so I did that for 3 months, and then I ended up moving into a more technical role, which is where I am now. I'm actually an associate cybersecurity analyst in cyber forensics and investigations. So a lot of my job is protecting the firm's assets. So a lot of insider threat protection. So, making sure that basically people within the organization are not putting us at risk. And if they are, going through and mitigating that risk, getting rid of that risk through, things such as scripting, and just kind of using other searching techniques, technical searching techniques as well to do that. And that's a really fun job.
Yeah.
And then also within my role, I also do some process improvement. So I've actually built 2 web applications for my team that kind of just help us kind of view data better, some data that's in
some dashboards
that we have to, dashboards, data that we need to kind of know and check on, just makes our lives easier. So, that's like I said, that kind of helps because automation and cyber together, those are kind of the 2 areas that I really, really enjoy. So really can't ask for a better role there, but that's my background, and so.
Yeah, thanks. And then as like cybersecurity, is it a lot more like, is a lot of your time or your team's time spent in like preventative measures, or is it more like reactionary, like, oh shoot, we had a breach?
Yeah, so not necessarily a breach, but someone within the firm, they could sense is doing something maybe that they shouldn't be doing, or offloading data to an external location, which is a big no-no for any company because you want to protect your firm's information. So things like that, we'll get an incident like, hey, this person has been offloading external data. We need we may need some of their emails or something just to see what they're taking, off the network or anything like that. Or, I may get called in as well to get rid of some confidential information from a client that's in our systems or something like that. Anything related to that. And there are incidents that come in. So it's just, it could happen. One day you may have 10 incidents, one day you may have like 2. We work a lot with lawyers within the firm, so we provide them with the information they need to carry out these investigations, just to make sure that there's no legal risk there, nothing that's put in the firm at risk.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So like internal lawyers that are like serving like the company's needs in terms of protecting their employees and stuff like that.
Yep.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, it's super interesting. My like new job's in like sort of the security part of Oracle's cloud. And like I think we're doing a lot of similar stuff in terms of like security and trying to make it easier for people not to break like secure practices and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's definitely necessary. That falls in line with kind of like the tech risk thing where you're looking at different standards. I'm sure you all probably have to follow different, coding standards, things like that to make sure that you're, keeping things safe. Is that what you are kind of doing?
Yeah, kind of. We're on like a new team, so I think we're still sort of, or at least, man, I'm new on the new team, so I'm still learning, the scope of our work, and also learning like what's publicly available and stuff since it's a new team and all that kind of stuff. And then shifting over to Ben, so you said you worked on human resource management system, right? And I guess they're both human resource management. But one's
yeah, like I mentioned, currently I'm working on our recruiting software, but the part of SAP that I work in is SuccessFactors, which is our human like experience management, or you could say HR or human capital management. It's kind of, they're all sort of synonymous.
Right.
So yeah.
And so that's also geared for internal users, right? Like when you think of the customer, are you thinking of like the people using that system or like the applicants or whatever?
Yeah, it definitely depends. So there's different personas you can think about. So when you're working on recruiting software, you have recruiters who, they're trying to find people to hire, and then also candidates. Yeah, so I actually work a lot on our externally facing recruiting software. So software that applicants use to apply to SAP and for our customers who are using our software. So I have to kind of think about all these different groups. So not just internal facing users, but also external. And I think it's actually sort of a unique thing at SAP. Most of our software is all internally facing for our customers. So once our customer gets our software, it's only the internal people at that company using it. But for
It's
the
like
software,
enterprise.
enterprise.
Yeah.
But the software I work on can be accessed by many, many millions of people. I mean, potentially every human on earth, right? So
Yeah.
you got to make sure that everything is working really well. It's accessible for anyone, people who are blind, people who have cognitive disabilities and all sorts of things, so that anyone can use it. And there are many countries with laws that say that, if the software isn't accessible, then, we could be sued as a company because we're not providing accessible software. So it's a big focus too. Yeah.
So I guess US isn't one of those countries.
No, not as strict as some of the other ones. I think it depends on the country. I know from kind of personal experience, Canada is pretty strict on accessibility.
I can see that. Okay.
So, yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. And sort of along that same line, is that sort of more customer-centric or user-centric perspective something that drew you towards product management, or why did you even want to go towards that route?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a few reasons. One of the big reasons that I really like interacting with customers, finding out their pain points and seeing what I can do to improve their software. And I love when customers come to me with a problem and then I can try to figure out a really elegant solution to that problem and then bring it into the software. And a lot of times when I, improve our software, it's not just ideas from me, it's mostly ideas from our customers. And then it's also ideas from our engineers and designers. So it's like you take everyone's perspective as a product manager, and then you try to figure out what's the quickest, most elegant solution, but something that also is what the customer wants. You got to balance, because you can build this amazing thing that will take a year of engineering capacity that solves the same problem as something that could take, say, a week of work. So you got to make those trade-offs, which I also really like, figuring out what should go in the product. And I remember, so I've had some internships as a software engineer, and I've been on teams, and I've also worked on like full stack applications as the only software engineer on the team. And I realized so I realized when you're kind of working on your own project, you have a lot of say into what you do. But when you're on a big team, you, as a software engineer, you don't always have a lot of say. You're kind of told what to do sometimes. And I realized I liked having that voice. And so that kind of also led me towards product management too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then I know going into product or project management, you don't necessarily need a CS degree, even if you're on like a technical team. So how do you think your CS background and I guess MHS background, how do you think that helped you on your job, or do you think it really didn't really matter?
Yeah, so for me, I think it helped a lot, and it continues to do so. And I know many product managers who don't have a technical background, and I think a lot of times that can be a problem. So when you're a product manager and you don't have a technical background, you don't really know how long things are going to take. So you can ask an engineer and they can give you an answer, but you have no way of knowing whether that's actually realistic or not. And a lot of times I'll have meetings with product managers who will claim something, could take a really long time. But being a former software engineer, I know that certain things should not take a long time. And if they are, then we have a different problem. Either, we're not getting bad information from an engineer, or maybe our tools are, need improving or something like that. So it definitely helps me know how long things will take. It helps me know whether engineers are kind of being honest with me. And it allows me to help the engineers and kind of propose different ways to go about things. I can directly tell them, like, try this. This is what I would do if I were trying to solve this. And I wouldn't know any of that if I didn't have that CS degree background. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that same sort of question for you, John. So how did your education play a role into like the professional work life? And did you end up using a lot of stuff or some things that you learned from school, or is it more just like the problem solving aspect?
Yeah, so when I first started in the business analyst role, I would say that not all of my CS knowledge really was used really at all. It was basically all business. I really wasn't doing anything technical. There was one project I was working on where I was analyzing some data, so that was helpful because in CS, you kind of have to analyze the problem and figure out, what's the best way of going about it. So I think that in that role, the thing that I used most was my ability to kind of make the job more efficient. So if I saw that there was like, oh, we have this big amount of data that we need to kind of look through or, figure out what's going on, it just kind of helped me consolidate that data and just kind of figure out a faster way to do things so that it wouldn't take me as much time, or an easier way to do things. So yeah, that role, not as much as a business analyst, but in my role now, I do a lot of PowerShell scripting. So understanding kind of how PowerShell works, obviously that's a big technical piece. So, CS definitely helped with that. And then the web applications, obviously, like, they were .NET Core 3.0 web applications. So just understanding the stack and, how kind of the database links to application and how, the front end is supposed to be designed, just understanding all of that from a programming perspective, that CS degree, I can say, was very helpful. I actually didn't take any web dev courses at Vandy. Shout out to Graham Hemingway. But anyway, yeah, so I did take that course, but honestly, looking back, I kind of wish I did because I felt like that would have been super helpful. And web dev is like so big now
Definitely.
that, it's like there's such a need for it everywhere. But yeah, so scripting, programming, yeah. And then on the day-to-day, just figuring out, when we get an incident, hey, what's the best way to, complete this or get this done? Like, that's huge, what tools do I need to use to get this done? I feel like my CS degree has been super helpful in doing that. I don't think I'd be able to, pick up some of our tool set as quickly if I hadn't been exposed to, the CS classes that we took, for sure. Haven't really used data structures and stuff like that as much, but it's just helpful to know how to program in general. So yeah, definitely has been useful.
What about your corporate strategy minor? Have you used that much?
Oh yeah, I guess just like understanding how to writing emails, man. Like, it's even a technical thing, but like writing emails, if you write, if you respond the wrong, because we interface with a lot of directors and things like that who are asking for, these incidents to be done, or they need information from us. And so, when you get on a call with these directors and just how to speak with them and how to articulate yourself, or how to, go back and forth in email, it's like you need to be very succinct. You need to make sure that you're not trying to step on any toe. Like, there's just a lot of different things that you need to know. And so I think that definitely my corporate strategy minor helped there. And even in the business analyst role, I think that corporate strategy minor obviously was even more important, because now I'm doing technical work and my managers do a lot more of the interfacing. Like, I do some of the interfacing, but my managers do a lot of it. I'm more so, like I said, the analyst who does the work. But in that business analyst role, I was like meeting with directors to help them, because the people leading these teams are like senior managers. So like, you're meeting with them, helping them set up a project. And so it's like, you can't come on that call, like, oh, well, maybe no, you have your things in a row, because it's like, you don't want to waste their time. You realize really quickly, like, you do not want to waste people's time. So definitely, how to articulate yourself, emails, how to write business requirements. And I think that's super helpful, just how to articulate. Ben obviously knows about this, but just how to articulate technology into the business sense is like something that I think everybody, even software engineers, need to know. you really can't become a manager or something on another level if you don't know how the technology impacts the business. Like you just don't,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing, especially I know startups definitely want their engineers to like have a better sense of sort of like the business's goal, because they don't want you just to build something, but like you're building it in the wrong mindset or building it for like the wrong type of user or type of use case. So yeah, I definitely think that's a very strong thing to know, especially if you want to go into someone like Ben's position and be a product manager. You need to have that sort of broader view.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, yeah, so you mentioned a couple of things that you learned on the jobs, or like protocol or etiquette, I guess, and just like how to work. Ben, what are some things that you learned outside of school and just on the job?
Yeah. I would say in any job that you join, you're going to have to learn a whole bunch of new things for sure. So I would say a lot of what I learned in college didn't necessarily translate to what a product manager does
Sure.
when it comes to kind of prioritizing what work to do and how you like the vision of the software as well. Sort of just things that you have to pick up on the job. And also, John mentioned, writing business requirements and, even product requirements and just all sorts of requirements. I'm not sure that I
Yeah.
learned a whole lot in college regarding that. I also
Right.
didn't have the corporate strategy minor, so maybe I would have
No,
learned.
I don't think I even learned that in the corporate strategy minor. Like, not the way that
Yeah,
the organizations really want them, done.
Right.
yeah. So yeah, that's definitely something to pick up. But I guess it all goes back to wanting to, build the best software for the customers that you're serving, and just kind of, if you think of it too about just like a win-win-win, like you want to win for the company you work for, you want to win for the customers who are using the software, and you want to win for the end users who ultimately have to use the software. So with B2B, you build software, and then the customer and the people who are buying it are usually, the people who aren't actually using it. So sometimes there's a disconnect where you have all these features, but then it's hard for the end users to use it, and it may get sold, but then the people using it are really unhappy, and then that hurts renewals. And so a company may buy your software and then they don't renew it
Interesting.
because the users can't use it. So
Huh.
I think it's really important not just to sell the software, but to have people enjoy using it and be able to use it, have it, be performant, usable, etc. So a lot of times in the B2B space, things were first created to just kind of solve the business needs. And now it goes beyond that, but also you need to solve the end user's needs and for, I guess, everyone to be happy with it. So it's something I learned as well coming
Yeah.
in, and something that I wouldn't say that college prepared me for that either. So.
Right. Yeah, it definitely sounds when you do B2B, especially if it's like B2B to C. I think that's a term. But
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
yeah. Which I don't know if is like strictly, because I don't know if the businesses are selling the software. But anyways, there's definitely that added layer in like that we're giving you, or you're buying or licensing our software. That doesn't mean like you're going to be using all of the features. That doesn't mean like you know how to implement it right. So there's definitely
Yeah.
that extra layer.
Right. Yeah, I even going to that last piece, implementing it right. I mean, that's another whole thing where there's so many ways you can implement software, and B2B
Sure.
especially. There's not just one size fits all. It's very customizable. So sometimes customers and end users are unaware of the features that they have, and sometimes it can look different for different customers too. They could be using the same software with a different switch turned on, and it can affect
Right.
what they're doing, and then they're not sure how to like do a certain thing, and it's like, well, there's different kind of versions here, like which one are you using? So that can get confusing too. So trying to make that whole thing easier, the software easier to implement. And I think it's like sort of years ago they wanted to customize everything for every customer, but now I think the shift is more so where you sort of want it standardized with a few things that you can customize. But
Right.
if you have too many options, it becomes very hard to help your customers.
On the support side. Yeah.
Yeah, on the support side, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, and sort of going back a little bit to sort of like your college experiences and how they prepared you. Is there anything looking back on it? And you're both class of, no, Ben, you're class of 2018 or 19?
Yeah, 2018.
18, okay, that's what I thought. And then John's 2019. Is there anything that you would have done differently, either academically or even extracurricularly? Like, oh, I should have been more involved in this or that or the other.
So I definitely thing
It's
that
quick.
I didn't know. Oh yeah, one thing I didn't know about was the like HOD and CS thing. So I thought that because during
So yeah,
college,
say what's HOD again?
oh sorry, human development at Vanderbilt. It's like there's so many people in that major, but they have good placement in consulting for sure. But I thought that my sophomore year I was kind of thinking like, oh, I like business and tech, so maybe I'll be a tech consultant. Which now I don't want to be a tech consultant, but anyway, yeah, so I think that, and I think that all the math that I took in the CS program personally, I don't necessarily think that was even needed.
Sure.
So I think that, I definitely could have either made HOD like my main major and then, had, which I think this is how it works in CS, like my second major or minor or something.
Yep.
And just kind of
Yeah.
leverage that and not have to take like all the math because like at the end of the day, no one's going to ask me to do calculus. Like, no.
Yeah.
So I think that that's one thing for sure.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I'm with you on that with the math. That was always my least favorite part of the CS major. And yeah, definitely don't need calculus at all for what I do. So yeah, I did hear of people doing HOD primary, CS secondary. I think that would really help a lot as far as kind of working in business and having that CS background. So maybe Vandy could kind of push that more. I don't know if they don't really push that or advertise that much, but the people who I know who did it, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. So.
Yeah.
They seem way happier too.
Yeah. And probably better GPAs as well.
Yeah, I think that's a big sort of disconnect or just like lack of understanding going into college. Is just sort of like the connection between your education and then like your life after. Obviously if you're going to like pre-law or pre-med or pre-PhD, it's a little bit more straightforward, like, oh, I'm going to do a PhD in biology. Well, let me study biology then. But the corporate workspace is so diverse in the number of like positions they have, and just there's so many different ways to get to the same place at the same company. So I think, but then when you're going into high school, it's more like, okay, choose your major, and then that's the only choice. It's like, well, really, you have your major, and then there's also minors. There's just like already that added complexity. And then also each one of these can go to all these different directions. And some will open some doors more than others. And I think that's something that like coming out as 18, 19, whatever from high school, you really have no idea about. And even halfway through college, you might not really have a good grasp of sort of the options that you have. Because yeah, personally, I came in as a chemical engineer or a chemical engineering degree. And then after my sophomore year, and really during my sophomore year, I was like, yeah, this is probably isn't for me. So I ended up only with like a CS minor, and I did sort of that engineering science, make your own engineering major as my major. But looking back on it, like I probably would have ended up with like a pretty similar final degree because I like the flexibility that like engineering science gave you. I could still take as many CS classes as I want, but I could like skip some of the more hardware oriented one, which are the ones I don't really care about. Definitely more interested in like design and stuff like that, and like algorithms was definitely a great class I took. And yeah, I even like encouraged this one guy, Abhishek. I was just chilling in Featheringill, our like main engineering building, and he just came out of the office. And I like kind of knew him. I was like, hey, what's up? And he had just dropped OS. Yeah, I think he just dropped operating systems.
Oh, wow.
He was a sophomore. And then this was after I made the switch too. And I like told him about my sort of like educational journey and whatnot. And I ended up convincing him to drop CS major and just get a minor, a beefed up minor in CS with engineering science as the, main major or only major.
Yeah, my sophomore year, I'd actually thought about that. Like, I'd actually thought about switching to engineering science. So I was kind of going through process and like, looking at it. And then I don't know, I just started thinking like, I'm one of those guys where I kind of like, I don't know, I kind of want like a surefire way, or I feel like it's, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I didn't think engineering science wouldn't work. I just was like thinking like, oh, if I go to the career fair with ES, like, I might have a CS minor, but like, how do I explain like this or explain the program, versus like, I was like, oh, well, when I go to the career fair, I go to interview with like a CS degree, like, it's pretty standard everywhere. So they'll be, oh yeah, I know
Makes
what
sense.
you look like. I know, so I think for me, it was more so just kind of being like, I don't know if it'll work out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe that I don't know how easy it'll be to, get into the space I want to get into, or explain to them, what I can bring to the table basically with that, So,
yeah.
I had concerns with that as well with ES. I really liked that major, and I was thinking about it too, but I was worried. I was worried that when I applied to companies, they wouldn't know what that was, or my resume would just get rejected automatically.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why I stuck with computer science as well. And I think maybe if I don't know if companies do reject you if you don't have a CS degree and you're applying for software engineering positions, they probably don't just automatically reject you. But
right.
Back in the in college, I guess it was a concern. So
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Maybe Vandy could do more to help people out in that position, or they could let other companies know that it's definitely a viable and a good major, and allows you to kind of explore more of what you're interested in rather than being locked into kind of one very strict program. So
right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, personally, I can say from my experience, switching over to ES, is that as long as I could explain to myself, why I'm on the switch, which was, sort of the more horizontal breadth of knowledge and like skills and classes I could take, and the more flexibility, because especially coming from Chemi, I mean, NCS is pretty rigid too, but Chemi, I think, is like 130 some hour course load, and that's like the ones you have to take, which, I mean, if you break it down like semester by semester, like there's really not any wiggle room. And like if you're taking only like 15, 16 hours, which is low for like Chemi, is you do not want to take more, because there's some fucking hard classes within those hours. And CS definitely has their own like really difficult semesters too. But yeah, I think as long as you could, explain it to yourself, then you'll be able to explain it to an employer. I definitely did have some concerns, and definitely didn't apply to some of those like, FANG tech companies, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix. Is it Netflix? And then Google. Yeah. So I didn't apply to some of those because I was like, hey, I don't think, well, one, I knew my technical since I picked it up kind of late. It wasn't as a beefy CS minor as I wanted. So I wasn't too confident in my abilities there. And then also I thought like, oh, I'm, just a CS minor. But I think especially if you're able to get some professional experience early, it definitely sort of lightens the burden. And this goes for really any field, pre-professional. Like if you get some experience, your academic history matters a lot less.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
So
and that was, go ahead.
How did you, because I know you were at, what company were you
Change
at?
Healthcare.
Yeah, saying you were kind of in more of a software dev role.
Yeah,
How did that like prepare you to like be an engineer now? Like how did that prepare you, or did you have to do like some extra stuff on the side to like?
No, that's a great question. I didn't do too much extra on the side besides like technical interview prep. Okay. And I actually had a really sort of, well, it's unique to me because I haven't really heard it, but sort of roundabout way to get this software dev or software dev engineer position at Oracle. So my last rotation, in my Change Healthcare rotational program. We did 4 6-month rotations. My last one was as a DevOps engineer in Seattle. So we had an enterprise DevOps team that basically made DevOps practices and principles easier to implement, usually through obviously programming within our teams. So that position, oh, sorry, that's not supposed to go off. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I don't have any other meeting. That's just a random one. So that position in DevOps is like a very hot sort of like trendy term in a lot of like tech spaces. Typically, they just want engineers or software engineers to have a DevOps mindset, not necessarily have a dedicated DevOps team. But so that position made me a lot more qualified, or opened a lot of doors in sort of like the support space. So the original job description or job title that Oracle reached out was actually for this SRE role, which is something Google actually invented. It's a site reliability engineer. Are you familiar with it?
I've heard of this role, yeah. I know some
Yeah.
people who are in it as well.
Oh, really?
At Apple. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically, and then I'm not, obviously I just interviewed for, I don't know, the best description. It's like a really technical support role. So basically, usually support people will just like sort of diagnose a problem, then hand it off. But for SREs, they can actually do, since they have a little bit more of a technical background, they can actually maybe solve the problem or get a couple steps into it to sort of diagnose it even further. For instance, in the cloud space, like, oh, like you don't have a load balancer on one of your servers or whatnot. So they can actually spin up, you know, a load balancer, add different parts of like their architecture basically. So that's the position they reached out for, I interviewed for, and it went pretty well. It was pretty much like a normal dev interview. So there was a technical part and a behavioral part. I think I had 4 45-minute interviews. And I think the main difference, and then I'm not sure because I didn't interview for just a normal software dev position, is that the technical questions were easier. I was able to solve each of them, and then code, I got all like basic, I think I got all the code complete for 3 of them, and then one, like I just didn't have enough time to write it out. But I had like the architecture, like the plan laid out. And so did really well on those. And then they got back to me a few weeks later saying I got the position. But it was actually kind of weird because the SRE is more of a support function. So they're not really tied to a specific team. They're sort of like a horizontal support team for the security organization. But when they emailed it to me, they said, oh, our team would like to extend you an offer. And I think he mentioned what his team title was. And I was like, oh, that's sort of like weird verbiage or like weird wording. So when I talked to him, they were offering me just a plain, or I don't know if plain's the right word, it sounds sort of like negative, but they were just giving me like their base software development position from a specific team. And I asked, like, you know, why did I end up getting this job I didn't even apply for, even though I was happy because like this is where I wanted to go anyway. And he said just like, especially I did well in the interview, and especially on like the technical aspects, I was like a lot better than the other candidates. So they thought I was like, you know, ready for just like a software dev role. It's also like a funny thing that I've seen in my personal sort of academic career history, if you can call it a career. It's just that like if I put enough energy or like do enough of the right things and I have like a particular goal in mind, so in this case it'd be like, you know, preparing for a typical software engineering interview. And in this rotational program is very flexible in the fact that I can state my preferences for each rotation. And so I intentionally wanted to do more technical rotations within the program. So like just these decisions and that were related to a goal I had in mind. Like I just sort of got put in a place where that goal got actualized. It wasn't anything necessarily like special I did, but it was just making like the right decisions at the right times. And then I ended up where I wanted to be. How do you guys feel about that sort of like, do you guys see that in your own like career paths, or was it just like, obviously you mentioned it was sort of lucky that you got to your position, Ben?
Yeah, I guess I'll tell you a story about a past job I had, and this was actually before I went to college. I worked for a startup called Viking 360, and I don't know if you've heard of them, but if you've ever played Call of Duty, then this will be kind of relatable for you.
Okay.
Played Call of Duty?
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. Okay, so
At least.
yeah, back in the day,
The
pre-college,
Gulag, baby.
I played so much Call of Duty, tons and tons of Call of Duty. I was really good at it too, and I was super competitive because I've never been like amazing at sports. Like I'm decent, obviously,
Yeah.
but I'm not great. But I've always been like pretty good at video games, and if I play enough hours, I like keep getting better.
Nice.
With sports, I sort of plateau and I can't get better. So video games was fun for me because I'm competitive and I could actually get better. So
Right.
played a lot of Call of Duty, and I realized I wanted like even more competitive advantages. So I bought
Hacker.
a modded what?
I said hacker.
Yeah. I bought a modded controller from Viking 360.
Oh God. This guy, what the heck? Oh.
So anyway, they released this controller called the macro controller, and you as a customer could build your own mods for Call of Duty using their software.
Interesting.
You could actually build mods for any game. And so what happened was I got the controller. Most people found the software to be like too difficult for them to figure out, or they just didn't want to spend the time to build these mods. They just wanted to buy the controller, download mods, and put it on their controller.
Yeah.
So I started making these mods, and I reached out to the company because I started learning all of this stuff about the controller, like how to make it better, how to like, mess around with their software and like do all this stuff. So
interesting.
I reached out and I applied, and they gave me a job, which was awesome.
That's insane.
So,
that's crazy.
Yeah. So I was in high school and working for a company. They were based in Washington State, and I was living in upstate New York. So it was a fully remote position. I started doing all sorts of things. And I think this is what really prepared me for product management. So I started interacting with customers, figuring out what mods they wanted.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I started.
As a high schooler.
I started working on. Started working on like support related things. So when customers complain their controller didn't work, I would be kind of like the first person like triaging it, trying to figure out how to fix it before I realized, okay, you're gonna have to send it in because this is a hardware issue. So anything that wasn't hardware, I would usually be able to fix for them, which was really cool too. So then this one feature, and again, this is what really prepared me for product management, it was called the Turbo Knife. And I got the idea from someone who, a customer essentially, who is like, there's this thing where if you press all these buttons, you can like improve how fast you knife in Call of Duty.
Oh, wow.
So the way it worked is knifing, and then the animation could be broken right as soon as you finish knifing. And if you break the animation, you can then knife really fast.
Gotcha.
And there's no negative impacts. It just allows you to knife faster. Wow. The same thing works with the riot shield. So you could turbo riot shield as well.
Oh my God.
Which was super.
Before this was Black Ops, right?
Yeah, Black Ops, Modern Warfare, both those like.
I've dealt with people like this before, and I was very frustrated.
And I was gonna say they probably used my mod. It was downloaded thousands of times.
Damn.
And in fact, Infinity Ward, who makes Modern Warfare, they came out with patches for the game because of the mods I was making.
Damn.
Dude, that's great. Like, man.
That's a story, bro. That's awesome.
Yeah. Whenever I tell this in interviews, it's definitely it gets cool reaction. So,
he gets job offers. That's what happens.
Yeah.
Like, this is the one. This one.
So
Facebook
anyway,
and Google missed out, bro.
Right. So yeah, I would do some like YouTube videos and do some marketing, and I even like would do sales. So I would like call
What
people
the
and be like,
hell?
"Hey, do you want to buy this controller? Like, here's what it can do." So I was just doing sort of everything,
Crazy. Yeah.
because
Definitely startup vibes.
startup vibes, right? Yeah, you
Yeah.
just do everything. And then eventually Microsoft created a controller that was very similar to what we had, and they
Look at
basically put us out
Microsoft.
of business because, like, why would you buy like a third party
Yeah.
modded controller when you can just buy the original controller from Microsoft? So we had
Yeah.
like the buttons on the back, and that was like revolutionary at the time. And then again, Microsoft started making the paddles on the back, and then they copied us. So
Yeah. That's big
so
in the tech
anyway,
industry.
yep.
Yeah.
So at the time, it was really cool. We were doing revolutionary things. So cool that other companies copied us, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, we were small, and so these other companies copying us put us out of business after a few
Yeah.
years.
That's,
But
Yeah.
in the beginning, it was awesome. I mean, I
Yeah. That
got
sounds
yeah,
amazing.
got tons of experience. Learned what it was like to have like product releases, feature releases, like hyping customers up. Like, we're coming out with this new feature in a week or a few weeks, and it was just
Damn.
a really cool experience.
yeah.
And
Man, you're just the coolest kid in high school, man. Or just like a nerd that's on a computer all the time playing
it
video
was it
games.
was both.
And I think you touched on like one super important thing too, which is like the marketing aspect and the selling aspect,
Mm.
which is like so huge probably in your area as well. Just like, well, in any area really, just selling like what you can do is so important. So
Right.
great.
Right.
Yeah.
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 So SAP has really awesome sales and marketing, for sure. As a product manager, though, you definitely, at least in B2B, a lot of times you have to work with people in sales and figure out what customers want. And sometimes they say, well, if we just had this one feature, we could get a sale. Sometimes you are tempted to then build that one feature, but you got to make sure it makes sense. Because
Right.
if it's something that's going to take forever and it's just one customer and we have thousands of customers, you got to weigh in on what's worth spending engineering capacity on. So
Yeah. That's definitely a hard part for a lot of these startups that are like trying to build a brand. It doesn't matter if the tech is great or if the product is great, but if you can't communicate that effectively to especially like the early adopters, there's just like no way you're gonna survive. And there's probably like 3 other startups that are doing pretty much the same exact function as you're doing. So how do you differentiate yourself from those competitors? Because it's not like you're giving these products out, you're giving advertisements and stuff out before you're actually handing over the product.
yeah, and even once you differentiate yourself, pricing is really key too.
Yeah.
We see nowadays with software startups, pricing is super low because they just want to acquire customers.
Yeah.
Which can be really great for businesses where the startup has the best software and they have the lowest prices. It's like super win-win.
Right.
But then the startup needs a ton of funding
Capital.
money.
Yeah.
Right, so that it can stay alive. And then when they do want to increase prices, it can be hard, and then customers don't want to pay the extra money. So sometimes that can be difficult. And back when I was working for Viking, our product was expensive, and that was again another issue. Like, it costs a lot of money, and we didn't have, like, back at that point, there wasn't a whole lot of funding for startups like there is today.
Right.
So it's tough because if you want to lower prices, then you can't stay afloat. If you keep your prices high, you still can't stay afloat because it's too expensive, right? So
Right.
yeah, that can be tough for startups too.
Yeah, I was wondering too. So I know you kind of talked about holistically as a product manager, right? You work some with sales. You're basically like, it says in the name, you're owning the product. But like, what are you? And you work with some developers sometimes to kind of give them, your insight into some things. How, I guess, do you look at the product at all from a security perspective, or like, hey, how can the customers break this, or how can they, is it vulnerable in any areas? Like, do you look at that as well as from the software perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few different ways. So whenever we're building something brand new, we do what's called threat modeling. So we have engineers spend time on trying to like look for vulnerabilities and look for ways that things can be abused and all of that. So it's part of the feature release is you have to make sure that this is a secure thing. And then there's other things too. So when you're building something new, let's say new APIs, making sure that people can't access fields that might be sensitive. So for instance, with recruiting, there are some positions where companies are fine with showing the hourly wage or even the salary or like the salary range. Some positions, totally fine. But then other positions, they do not, like customers do not want applicants to see how much it pays, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The VP.
Yeah, exactly. So, right.
What the fuck?
So
what? Oh, God.
yeah. So it's like making sure that those APIs that deliver salary information is secure and that it also allows certain positions to have it. But then if you try to call that API in a different position, then we can't actually access that salary from this API. So things like that, making sure they're locked down in that way. As a product manager, that's something I've brought up too, making sure that sensitive information for our customers is not leaked. And that's different than like PII, or personally identifiable information, because that's a whole nother topic for security, making sure candidate data is secure and that, you know, the databases are encrypted or the application layer is encrypted, or that we have a vault that we're storing like keys for to even access a lot of these things. So those topics come up, especially now, as you guys know, with Zoom having all these security issues right now, but they've been in the news for, right. They've gotten a lot better, right? And they're focusing on that. And I think lots of companies are now seeing the importance of security and are ramping up in that space. So
Zoom is actually hosted on Oracle Cloud. I don't know if you guys knew that.
I did not know that.
Oh.
Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned the security stuff.
That's before. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
I don't know, actually.
You can cut it out if needed.
Any recent improvements are because of us. That's what I'll say. No, that was great. Yeah, thanks for that story, Ben. That was great. And then sort of on that same idea of, you know, startup culture versus big company culture, obviously all three of us are at pretty large companies. I don't know where each of them are on the Forbes list, but they're definitely pretty sizable in terms of employees and revenue. So were you guys looking for a big company right out of college? I know a lot of people like to get it early on in their resume because it'll like open up a lot of doors. But obviously, Ben touched on some of the advantages of working in a startup, being sort of like a broad skill set and trying a lot of different things at a single company in a single position. So what were your guys' sort of thought processes around that coming out of college or even now?
Personally, I was looking for a larger company. And I think that I do want to work at a larger company for maybe not my entire career, but at least for, you know, the first 5 to 10 years, because I do kind of have a goal to, you know, maybe in some way be able to start something on my own, maybe do some type of IT consulting. You know, I feel like if you're able to bring like a good breadth of knowledge to the table, you can really help people. And I think that the connections that you need to do those things can be really are better formed in large organizations, because there's so many, you know, people you can meet, so many people that have worked in, you know, other places. They have great experience. You know, at the best companies, a lot of times you have some really intelligent people. So, you know, you can really form those connections. And so coming out of college, I was like, man, I really do want to be at a large company for a while. Stability as well, and especially in this coronavirus time, COVID is huge. And I feel like, you know, even though a lot of places are, you know, making cuts, I think that, you know, being at a larger company, there's a little bit less of an impact or a little bit more, you know, leeway, because they do have, you know, that cash, that revenue to kind of continue to support the business, even when things aren't going great and they have to kind of weather the storm. So that was kind of my thought process behind it. And, you know, smaller companies I think can be great because, you know, you may get more hands-on experience with maybe the top level people that you may not be able to get as much of at a large organization, because, you know, there's so many, I mean, you know, especially in my company, there's so many managing directors, there's so many levels in managing directors, there's so many senior managers, so many teams. Personally, my team is very small, so I get to, you know, interface with my team lead a lot, and you know, the two managers. There's like 3 of us or 4 of us on my of the team, and that's including the guy who leads the entire team. So really, it's like 3 of us.
Wow.
And so we're, you know, pretty close, and so that kind of allows you to kind of have like a smaller company vibe, because you can get access to those managers and work, and like basically get to look at all the work and ask any questions that you need. But that's not always the case, because a lot of times these large company teams are pretty big, or they can be pretty big. And so, you know, I think that there's benefits to both. But yeah, personally, when I came out of college, and even now, I think that, you know, staying in a larger company, even though there are some obviously negatives to everything, I think that the positives at these larger companies, to me, kind of outweigh you know, the negatives. And also getting that experience, like the company name, obviously, like, oh, if I have Oracle on my resume, or I have Deloitte, or I have SAP, or I have, you know, some big company on my resume, they'll be like, you know, you're used to working across different functions. You're used to working in a fast-paced environment, dealing with all these different areas, all these different things that can go wrong. You know, I'm sure that both of you all in your jobs have to communicate with other teams to get your stuff done. Obviously Ben does, because he's a product owner, but it's like, you know, you have to learn how to kind of figure out how to stay on schedule while, you know, waiting on other people to do things, or just, you know, making sure that you're putting that in. And so it just helps you to kind of pick up, it's really a skill, honestly, working in, you know, larger organizations. And I think that's really a good thing. So that was kind of my thought process on it. But
yeah, I definitely think you're right on a lot of those points. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I also was very much interested in a large company coming out of college. And like when I was applying, I was just really focused on the top big companies, tech companies, or finance tech companies. So I definitely was interested in FANG for sure. But then also, you know, SAP, Oracle, Capital One. I mean, there are plenty of other companies too besides FANG. But yeah, definitely was interested in large companies. And part of it is kind of the stability of it. With startups, you never know how they're going to do. And a lot were impacted by you know, COVID-19. I know people working for startups who lost their jobs. I know some who had to take pay cuts to stay hired, and that's, you know, always tough to handle. So I know with a lot of these larger companies, they're all thriving, actually, like, you know, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, SAP. I mean, all doing really well, even in the coronavirus. And so
Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, the stability of that. But also too, opportunities. So going into a startup, you could go in as a software engineer, but I didn't really find any startups willing to take a chance on someone out of college for product management. You know, a lot of startups maybe can't like afford that, because if you don't have experience and you don't know what you're doing, that could be really, really detrimental to the product. Versus a big company, you can kind of start off in maybe an internally facing product, or a rotational program where the expectations might be a little bit lower. And then as you prove yourself, you can step into a more impactful role. And then the company knows that, okay, you've got this. With a startup, you don't have that luxury always. And if you make one mistake, that could kill the startup. Versus a big brand, it's not, you know, always going to be critical. If you make a mistake, it might be a good thing, depending on if it's a small mistake or not. So for me, yeah, large companies was what I was looking for. And I think I want to stay in there for several years as well, just like John. I thought about potentially starting a company, but I don't know. I mean, I looked into it. It's tough. I mean, with brands and creating a brand, sometimes it's luck, and sometimes
definitely.
If you find something that no one's doing, but then all of a sudden a new competitor does the same thing as you, and then they can just like kill your startup as well. So very risky. And but I guess I don't know. I was a little
No, you're fine.
all over the place, but yeah, for me, large companies is what I've been interested in.
Yeah, no, I agree with both of you. I think definitely that stability and sort of lack of volatility is definitely important. Especially right coming out of college, you probably have some college loans. If you're, an average college student,
Right.
you got like 10,000 or however much of 10,000 is probably on the low end of college loans. And then, I mean, I've always felt, in some ways, don't really feel it anymore. But growing up, that just felt like kind of like a burden to my parents, especially financially. So I definitely know like they couldn't do certain things because, I was around, and they had to, pay, feed me, look after me and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely wanted something that, okay, now I can actually contribute. Now I can actually like be on the black side and like positive side of money, not on the red side. So that was definitely important for me. And another reason larger company was more suited for that kind of financial stability goal. Obviously, some students don't really care all that much about financial stability and try to do a startup out of college, which,
right.
all for that. But like other people don't really have that luxury of being able to do that. And then also, I think Ben mentioned sort of the not corporate ladder, but sort of you have more options at a larger company. There's more positions. So if you want to grow at a company and grow your career and want to stay there for a little bit, you do have more options of where to go. Where's the next little step? Because at a startup with more of a flat hierarchy, like the next step up's like a big step up, right?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree with both of you. And obviously now I'm even at a bigger company than I was before. Still sort of on that track. And like Ben mentioned, I am also definitely interested in sort of the entrepreneurship. And actually John mentioned it a little while back too. Either as like an IT consultant or starting your own company. That's always, I mean, I feel like our generation, that's huge, entrepreneurship, in all its different forms. And so sort of looking at the, the next step, and you can think of this like skill development wise if you want, if you don't have like a set, position that you're looking for next. What are you guys trying to get out of your next, 2 to 5 years of employment? That's a tough question, so you can, go ahead.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you can go first.
All right. Yeah, for me, I definitely want to keep rising up the ranks of product management. Yeah, I mean, if I had gone into software engineering out of college, then I think I would still say I would want to become a product manager in that 2 to 5 year time frame. So now that I am a current product manager, I definitely would want to move more into the kind of a senior product manager role. And then from there, maybe a manager of product managers or kind of like a director of product management, maybe even eventually VP of product, and kind of move up the ladder of product. I ultimately, if I were to have like an end goal for the corporate world, I would want to move up onto kind of the board for a company and be involved in executive management and make really big decisions for the company. Yeah. That is kind of my end goal. But yeah, on the path to there, I definitely want to rise the path of product. And I know some product managers who then want to move into operations management or, architecture management, like software architecture and different paths too. But for me, ultimately, I really like product. Definitely was like my dream position. Nice. Coming out of college. That's awesome. Once I had moved into the computer science space. So before that, pre-med and thinking I would be a doctor, but so anyway, yeah, that's the goal for me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, personally for me, next 2 to 5 years, I really would like to just learn more within cyber. So get some certifications. I know I do want to get the Security Plus certification. Probably something else regarding like networking, like secure networking, stuff like that. And then there's a big one. It's like the CISSP, and I think you have to have like a certain amount of experience to get it. But just things like that. I want to continue to learn more about security. I do like cyber forensics and investigations. I like the variability of it. I like how it's every day. You can kind of have a different problem to solve in cyber. So I think that I would like to maybe stay in that area, maybe do some, network penetration stuff, or, something along those lines. Just learn more about scripting. Like lately I've actually been, pretty interested in software dev and software engineering. So I won't mark that off my list. I just haven't really, it's been a while since I've been doing, I did some in my job, but like just daily, I do more of the cyber related stuff. Right. So I think that just continue to hone those skills, but I think ultimately like, just growing my career in cyber security. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be in forensics and investigations, specifically, so specifically forensic investigations, it doesn't have to be that. It could be, I do like threat hunting. Like that would be cool to me, like learning how to, design secure systems. That would be cool. Build secure systems. I just think a lot of cyber stuff is cool. I don't know. So it's like, I don't really have a specific path in cyber that I want to go. I kind of just want to learn everything. But I guess in a nutshell, I'm really just trying to figure out what area like I really want to take my career, because incident response and the area I'm in now are two great areas that I really think you can be a part of. You can do things related to all the other areas like threat intelligence or application security or penetration testing. Like I think that overall, I think my ideal cyber role would be like in the next 5 years is something that I can do some, forensic investigations as well as some incident response stuff, and just be able to respond to a bunch of different types of cyber problems. So that, whether it's, we want to know what's wrong with this application, from a security perspective, or we want you to look through this threat vulnerability data and figure out, if, what applications are most vulnerable, and, where we can fix this, just anything like that, really. Or if any incidents come in and, we got hacked today, or, there is a email phishing issue going on, like who is sending these out? How do we mitigate this risk so that people aren't clicking on these emails or, getting us into other issues? So just, anything from that perspective, really. That's really a broad range. So I don't really have, stepping stones. I would like to, I would like to become like a director in cyber, be over some pretty big parts of the system or the organization, be able to really just have a big impact in that area overall. That's my view, on it, and that's kind of where I want to go. So that's basically it. I mean,
that makes a lot of sense for both of you. I mean, it's nice so early in your careers to have found sort of a vertical or an idea of like a subsector of an industry that you're interested in. So obviously for Ben, it's product management, and then for John, more cybersecurity. Personally, I definitely, obviously you can see from my education, the rotational program I did after college, I definitely am interested in going, like, experiencing a lot of different sort of roles and getting a lot of like horizontal experiences, not taking too much of a deep dive into anyone. In the tech industry, I don't know if your companies use this, but there's like the idea of the T-shaped developer. Have you guys heard of that?
No, what is that?
No.
Okay. But it's basically like, you can think of it like skills basically. So like the top of the T is like a broad range of skills. So you can like talk very conceptually, I guess, about a lot of different things. and then they want like one vertical or one like area that you're like really do a deep dive and have a lot of knowledge about and maybe experience too. Like, you know, it could be like AI or it could be cyber or whatever, but to have a good sort of grasp of a lot of different concepts, so at least you can talk, you know, semi-intelligently about it. But then also like pen to paper, when you're actually, you know, on the computer doing something, you have something that's like, this is, you know, what you're concentrated on. This is what you know like the intricacies of and stuff like that. So for me, I think I'm still figuring out the bottom part of my T is my vertical, and sort of could be cybersecurity. It could be, I don't really know. I'm still trying to figure it out, honestly. Could be product management even. So yeah, I think that's what my next, you know, 2 to 5 years is really looking at, just seeing where I can definitely still early, so still trying to expand that top of that T, but also starting to explore some of the rabbit holes I can go down for that vertical part of the T. Yeah, I think that covered a lot of what I wanted to about sort of post-college and corporate life and your sort of goals and what led you to where you are. And so there's one connection between you guys, I think, I'm pretty sure, that I didn't realize until like after, you know, I paired you guys up. And I think both of you are involved in Greek life in college. Is that?
I am now. I wasn't in college.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I don't remember you like doing
No,
all.
I wasn't. Yeah, I am now, but I wasn't in college yet.
So. Okay.
Yeah, I was in KA in college.
Oh, right. Yeah. A lot of my people from my floor freshman year in KA. So I guess what was your guys' experience? And I guess John, you can say, you know, why you decided not to do Greek life, or would you, you know, want to do it if you did it over again? What was some of that experience for you? And it doesn't have to be necessarily related to like, you know, networking or getting a job or anything. But yeah. I guess Ben can go first since he actually was in a
okay, sure. Yeah. So I joined KA, and I honestly didn't think that I would join Greek life. And part of why I joined KA was to be a founding member. So at the time, they were just starting up again, and I had the opportunity to join executive council, which I felt was really cool because it would give me kind of a leadership position right off the bat. And if I wanted to, I could live in the fraternity house, which I ended up living there for 2 years.
Nice.
And it was actually really good housing on campus too. And I had my own parking spot and everything. So
wow.
There were a lot of perks to joining KA as opposed to other fraternities where I would have just been a member and I wouldn't have gotten to live in the house or be on exec or anything like that. So that's sort of why I joined KA. And then being able to shape it and grow it, we ended up growing a lot. So we started off really small, and by the time I left, we were pretty big and pretty up there with all the other fraternities. So that was really a cool experience too. And I basically was on exec for almost my whole college career too. So I got to learn a lot from that experience. I think that has helped me too in product management. So I started off on exec as the parliamentarian, so kind of just creating the bylaws and enforcing the laws, so to speak. But you know,
wow, party patrol.
Right. Well, we actually had a different person for that, the risk manager. So, so I didn't want to do that, but and then I became the secretary, which was also a good experience. So you take meeting minutes, which is super helpful in business too, because when you're in a meeting, it's actually so useful if you are taking notes at the meeting and then you send a follow-up at the end. People really respect that. And people who are above you and they see that and they get this concise like meeting summary, that goes a long way. And when like it's time for a promotion,
that's a good tip.
Good tip right here. If it's time for a promotion or anything like that, and you've been doing this, it's something that really stands out. So highly would recommend this, by the way. So that was good prep for that, to be honest. And also other coordination things too. So going into my senior year, I was actually not supposed to live in the fraternity house. I was going to live in a tower suite, but then we had a whole switch of like executive people in KA and like all sorts of things go on. So I had to like coordinate moving people in and out of the house into this tower suite, and I was going to live in the house, and then all these things. And some people were super happy about this, other people were not as happy about it. Some people, had there's all sorts of, different personalities that I had to deal with, right? And like,
Yeah.
I think that's so important in business too. Like, let's say you're on a board or just not even on a board. Let's just say you're working with teammates. Everybody has different personalities, different like things that are important to them, and figuring out how to make everyone happy with different decisions that are made and how to get people excited to do work. So for, product management, when I'm building a product, some engineers may not want to do this. So how can you get them excited about doing that? And so to be honest, Greek life actually really helped me a lot in that, which was really, really cool. So I'm happy I did it. And it was sort of almost random that I ended up doing it, because it was like, it was almost the last day of Rush, and I didn't really take it all that seriously. And then I went to KA and I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool, the connection with that and sort of product management. And then John, so obviously during college you weren't involved, and you were involved, I will say, in a lot of other extracurriculars. Is that like the main reason you decided you didn't have time to?
So I actually thought about it, but yeah, I mean, I think my thing during college was that I just didn't necessarily know if it was like necessary for me at that point. I thought it would be cool, but I joined NSBE pretty early, which is like National Society of Black Engineers. And I was pretty involved in that on the exec board. And so that really helped me, go to conferences, kind of figure out, how to operate, I guess, in a business sense, like, how to dress, how to communicate, how to network, things of that nature. And then, being on the exec board sophomore year, I started off as a telecommunications chair. And so that was basically just doing the social media aspect of it, but just kind of seeing how everything operated, learning how to stay organized, learning how to give reports. That's super important in corporate America. And then my junior year, I was vice president, which obviously, like, dealing with people, I mean, that's, something that you're going to have to do. And if you want to continue to rise up in any organization, obviously you're going to have to learn how to manage people, understand that they are people and not robots. So you have to learn about, hey, how are you feeling today? Not just, hey man, where's my work? Because that just, my kid's been pissing me. I'm saying, like, there's just so much stuff they could be dealing with. I mean, you don't want to, be so rigid. You want to kind of have a personal connection as well, and just let them realize that you care about them as well, and not just, them as a robot. And then senior year, I was president of that org. So, I mean, obviously that is just a lot to deal with. So you have to oversee everything. You have to communicate externally with, faculty, as well as, we had some alumni stuff. So communicating with, Vanderbilt Engineering alumni that had been a part of our organization, and just addressing some issues that we felt some of the students were having, just things like that. Being president, I think, was what really helped me grow as a person, because you were dealing with people from all types of perspectives. I mean, you were having to, make sure that your vice president was managing work, making sure that everything was getting done, running meetings. I mean, that's super important, being able to talk to people, articulate yourself, make sure that everybody in a meeting is staying on schedule, everybody's voice is being heard. I mean, there's just so much that kind of goes into that, while also obviously managing your school workload. So there's just a lot of that. Really, I think, helped me the most, because when I got into corporate America as a full-time employee, it's like, obviously at first they kind of baby feed you, but then they start to, like, give you more work, and then you have to manage multiple things at once. And so when you're used to kind of doing that, it's like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like I'll just, have my little Excel sheet with, my status updates, or I'll have my little notes document, what I need to do for today. And then this is my current end goal, you know what I mean? And then you provide, you have a tracker to track what you're doing, to track where you're at, then you can report that to your manager. Like there's just so much that came from that within that organization. And then obviously, obviously you guys may not know this, but Kai senior year, I was part of this org called Change++ that built software applications for the community. And so we were building an application for two Vandy alumni organizations. And so I was the technical project manager on that. I oversaw most of the dev and stuff, and communicated externally with like our stakeholders and stuff like that. And also it was a team of 5, including me. So just managed the other developers as well. So that also helped me see tech from a business perspective and understanding like, how can we get this done the fastest while also meeting like client expectations, as well as like, realizing that, hey, these are people and, that I'm working with, and I need to make sure that like I'm taking everything in consideration with their schoolwork and what they have going on, so that I'm not just, like some a-hole up here that they're just like, yeah, he just wants work. So I think both of those, being president and doing the technical project management stuff senior year, were 2 leadership positions that really just helped me a lot. And I actually did join Greek Life Now, an alumni chapter of a National Panhellenic Council organization. So Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated, I did join that organization this year. And so I'm hoping that I can continue to kind of grow my professional network in that. There are individuals in the organization who are much older than me. So I'm hoping to learn a lot from them. There's some, obviously there's college chapters and there's alumni chapters. So I'll kind of have a breadth of people to meet, but I'm just happy that I'll get a chance to kind of learn from these older individuals who are part of the organization, who are also professionals and stuff like that. So I'm looking to gain knowledge from them as well. So that's something that I'm pretty excited to be able to speak about in the future. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think both of you touched on something, or more than touched on, but just the idea of your extracurriculars and sort of just like your social life in college just being a good way to learn how to work with people in the corporate world. And obviously the experience was even heightened because both of you guys had leadership opportunities and experiences on both of your, organizations that you guys worked on. Personally, I sort of did, again, more of a horizontal approach when I was doing extracurriculars. I was like a little bit involved in a lot of different stuff. And there's multiple reasons. I'd say like the main reason is just because I liked meeting people and I have a lot of different interests. I don't mind going to all these different, general body meetings. And I think to a lesser extent, but to some extent, I also got to learn, how to work with people, and I got to see how leaderships of different organizations ran their organization. So I could do some, observatory studies on sort of how people ran their organizations. And sort of on that same track, I know networking is sort of a big buzzword in college for sure, and then out of college it doesn't really stop, or for some people it stops, but it really shouldn't. What are some of your guys' like views or tips or recommendations for people, in college or earlier in their career, in terms of networking? And it could be in person, it could be, we obviously have LinkedIn as a very strong professional network. So how have you guys, utilize those things?
Yeah, I can, start. So I guess there was networking pre-coronavirus and then networking post-coronavirus. So I guess let me talk first about pre-coronavirus, and eventually we will, go back to that, I think. but I mean, who
Right.
knows? Maybe we won't. But so I think events are really useful. So if you work for a big company, and a lot of times this company has events, even if it's any sort of social event, happy hours and such.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are there and who are open to talk about anything. You often, at least at big companies, can see, some executives who work in that building, and you can network with them. They're happy to talk to you, and you can ask them all sorts of questions about the business. And I would, encourage legitimate questions that you have to ask them about strategy and such, and they're more than happy to discuss it with you. And then sometimes too, you don't have to talk about business. You can just say, are you a fan of sports? And you can talk about sports or things like that too. I think it depends on the event. When it's after work, sometimes it's nicer to start more casually rather than talk about strictly work focused. If it's maybe a lunch event, then work focus sometimes makes more sense then. So
Right.
kind of figuring out the situation you're in, that's really good. And I would highly encourage, if you are invited to events, to attend. A lot of times people feel nervous to, or they don't want to spend extra time after work because they just want to go home. But it's definitely worthwhile. And then you start to kind of make your own brand and a name for yourself, and these execs remember talking to you, and that's always really good for your career. Outside of in a work environment, sometimes you can be invited to local places for just networking events with different companies, and you can speak to people all over. And showing an interest in others, I think, is a really good tip. So asking other people what they're working on, what they do, what they're interested in, passionate about, and then seeing if you have a mutual connection, and then going from there. So if you're both into something and you can discuss it, that always is a really good way to network. So that's kind of like the in-person networking. And then right now, obviously you can't do that in person, but if there are Zoom meetups, we have them at SAP, and I'm sure other places do as well. It's a little harder in a Zoom meeting because it's like everyone's in the same meeting, so you can't really have a one-on-one conversation with someone. But I think if you attend and people see your face, and if you ask a question when you have a chance, it's a good option. It's, not as good as in person, but it's kind of what we're dealing with now. So that's definitely something I would encourage. But yeah, LinkedIn, if there are meetups that are there, and I guess if they have like the smaller breakout groups functionality where you have like a small group and you can network within that group, and then you kind of switch groups within a Zoom call, I think that's useful. I haven't done one of those personally,
me either.
but I think, I've heard of it. And so I guess right now it's a little bit of a tough time. But I mean, I guess one thing I would say is, if you're passionate about, let's say, corporate strategy, or like if you work in a business and you see the company making a decision that you feel like could be better, I think being vocal about it, and even emailing someone who's way higher up and just saying, hey, can we have a quick one-on-one call? I'd love to discuss the strategy. And if you share your opinions and you have good points, I mean, that goes a long way. And so I definitely would encourage people to get out of their comfort zone. And sometimes it can be scary to email someone who's way higher up than you are. And sometimes you won't get a response, but then sometimes when you do, it's really cool. I'll say a past experience I had pre-corona. I was an intern at BNY Mellon, and I was able to schedule a one-on-one with the CEO of either Treasury I think it was Treasury Services at BNY Mellon.
Wow.
And his office was an entire floor. It was really cool. I mean, they don't really do that anymore, but it was like the coolest office I've ever seen. I'm sure he has like meetings with really rich clients, and that's why it's kind of like a showcase for them. But
that's insane.
It was the coolest thing ever. I mean, it was like one of the top floors at BNY Mellon in Pittsburgh. He had this whole floor, and it looked like a hotel, or like imagine if you were to go to Europe and see like the King's Quarters. It reminded me of that for some reason. So anyway,
vaulted ceilings.
Tips.
Yeah, it's a very cool experience. How about you, John?
Yeah, personally for me, I actually have a website where I wrote an article on this, but
Yes, sir.
I like this. I'll take it from like an intern perspective, and then for like an early professional perspective. I think as an intern, personally, in my experience, the first year I was there, I kind of touched on like, obviously I didn't really know much because I had just taken like one CS course. So a lot of my time literally was like learning how, like meeting people and just trying to figure out what everything was about and who did what, and just reaching out to a bunch of people within the organization. So the first year that I interned, my manager, and I really thank her for this because it showed me a lot. Each week she had me to like email a different person, didn't matter what level they were on, to like within the IT space of our organization, and book like a one-on-one on their calendar to just talk about what they do, whether it was somebody worked in like automation or architecture or security or any different area, just to like talk to them. So that's my first year. I was able to meet so many people because I literally was just didn't like, and kind of what Ben touched on, like stepping out of your comfort zone, like, you know, especially when you're an intern, people know you're there to learn, like you're not full-time. So they're more willing to take the time to speak with you about what they do, or, you know, give you advice because they realize that, like, you know, you're trying to make these important decisions in your own life. So yeah, just ended up meeting with a bunch of different people each week and learning a bunch of different things. And also kind of to Ben's story, had the opportunity to, you know, speak with have a call with the US CIO one time over our area. And I mean, it was crazy. You know, I think he was driving in his car in like Miami, but just like the fact that he, you know, took the time to speak with me, I was just like, it's crazy, you know, to just hear, you know, how they talk and just be able to kind of even just speak to them and hear, like, you know, how their day is going, kind of maybe not necessarily what they're working on, but just kind of what their thought process is on certain things and kind of the advice they have. And so, yeah, you know, I really like that point where, you know, just step out of your comfort zone and especially as an intern, be willing to just reach out to whoever. Of course, you know, have a goal in mind, have something that you send in the meeting invite, you know, and like Ben said, you may or may not get to meet with them, but a lot of times, I mean, you know, I was able to meet with, you know, a handful of directors because, you know, well, directors or like, you know, C-level leadership, because, you know, I was an intern, I just reached out and I just wanted to, you know, do that. And I think something else that's super important to do is, especially as an intern, is when you're in these calls or in these meetings, whether virtually or in person, you know, these company meetings, like speak up, you know, be the person to speak up, ask a question, say something, because they'll be like, "Ooh, you know, who is that?" Like, you know, "Oh, I know them now." You know what I mean? Like, you know, people appreciate that. And, you know, that's kind of how you get your face out there. Cause it's like, especially if you ask, like, make sure you have a well thought out question, something like, you know, "How's the weather today?" You know, hold on. You know, just have something that is, you know, thought provoking and like shows that you're actually like interested in what they're speaking about. You know, something that just kind of makes you stand out is super important as well, because then, you know, you may have an opportunity later to speak with them again, and then you can bring that up, or they can bring that up, or, you know, something like that. And I know that this is pre-corona, but the last internship I had, we had like an intern event where we had an entire like C-level of our organization. There's so many C-levels within within my area. We had like the C-level come out, and we got a chance to network with them as interns. And
nice.
This kind of has been said, like, be it like I think some people may not have come to that event, but it's just like, you know, they're right here. Like, they're right here. Like, just be here and, you know, have some questions for them, show that you're interested, talk to them, especially the person that may be the CIO of, like, you know, the CISO. So like the CISO was there, like, of course, I'm going to try to go to the CISO and ask him about, you know, what you know, he's worked at all these other huge companies. He's done crazy stuff for the Department of Defense. Like, that's like a gold mine right there to just ask questions and learn
Yeah.
more with that connection. So that's super important as well. And I think from an early professional perspective, I think it's just important to realize that, you know, you still have a long way to go. So don't get complacent, you
Mm.
know. So I think some people tend to get complacent even within their first year because they're like,
Yeah.
oh, you know, I made it to full time now, so I'll move up the ranks. But it's not really just how it happens. You know, you kind of have to show some differentiation. You have to do
Yeah.
something different, kind of out of the box to kind of separate yourself. So I think that that's important to realize is that, you know, still just be willing to reach out to people if you're in a meeting, like participate. Um, you know, be willing to like set up touch points with the leaders in your area to try
Mm.
to figure out, you know, what they did to get to that place, or you know, what you can do better in your role to make a bigger impact, or how you can even just you know, learn more quickly, and what you really need to be focused on. And another thing I think that people don't really think about is like having a mentor, having someone that you can, like a coach that you can just reach out to on a consistent basis. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be related to work all the time. I
Yeah.
mean, I was told you can have like several coaches for like different things that you want to speak about. So you could have one like, you know, that this person helps you with like my career, and this person is just someone I just trust and talk to about how I'm feeling about, you know, work or you know, just life in general. So I think that's something else that's important within the organization. I think that you should
Yeah.
try to reach out to someone at a higher level than you. Would be great if it's a director or something in an area you want to go into. But
Yeah.
you know, just someone that you can reach out to and that can give you good advice on where, you know, you need to go or where you want to go, and you know, how to get there. So that's kind of my spiel on that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I think both of you guys covered that really well. A lot of like the intricacies and pragmatic day-to-day stuff you can do and to look out for early career or during your internship. And I just like want to like us re-emphasize what both of you guys touched on about being sort of vocal. Obviously, networking doesn't exist without being vocal, right? Unless you're talking to people, unless you're making these interactions, you're not really networking. And then also the idea of sort of like intention. And so depending on, you know, your stage of career, that intention could be like, oh, I'm looking for, you know, a new position or a higher position. But earlier on, and even all the time, I think a big intention of networking is just be like learning about, you know, what they do, what brought them there, any tips, you know, for someone that's in your position. And especially, I know a lot of people are trying to move, especially from like a software engineer position to more of a PM, technical lead, where you're actually like a people manager. And I think that especially you want to make that vocal, make that, hey, I don't want to just be an engineer for the next, you know, 10 years, but make that intention of yours vocal, and people definitely will want to try to help you out. And yeah, definitely approaching from sort of a learning perspective, not like that you want a specific thing out of this relationship other than them to share their experiences. Are just like overall general networking tips that I've found. And we are sort of running a pretty good while, so I'll be respectful of your time. So let's just wrap up with one skill you'd like to either would have developed or gotten into further before you started your full-time roles after college. And this could be a skill that you would either get exposed to in, you know, school in the academic world, or it could be from a professional experience. But was one skill you think you would have liked to deepen or grow looking back on, you know, your college experience and pre-graduate experience? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess I'll start off. So as a product manager, kind of the skills required, instead of, I guess, a T, like you were kind of referring to, I think it's more of a circle where you need to like have a grasp of almost everything from engineering to business to sales to marketing to product, just sort of, you need to be a jack of all trades kind of thing.
Sure.
And I think one skill area that I kind of wish I had more of in college could be more so on like the sales marketing aspect. So I got an engineering focused degree and learned technical skills, and I took some like engineering management related classes where I learned some good like business skills and things that were related to product management a little bit. But as far as sales and marketing, I guess I never really took any classes on that, and I didn't have a whole lot of experience there. So kind of coming in and learning how SAP sells and markets their product and just how that whole thing works, I think it would have been better if I had maybe taken some classes in college related to sales and marketing, or even done my own coursework on it. Just now that we have all these online like websites you can go to, Udacity, Udemy, even YouTube as well. So
definitely.
So sales and marketing I think would be nice to have prior to the role, and that's what I would have had.
Cool.
Yeah, personally for me, I think in cyber, I really would have liked to have taken, I don't even know if Andy offers any cyber course, but I would have liked to take like a security course in school if possible. I think it would have been a good, even though I kind of interned in it the summer before, I think it would have been good to kind of have like a technical course to kind of understand cyber more from a technical perspective, although it's like very broad, just kind of a class to kind of give you a general
101.
Of like all the different areas and kind of the tools that they use would have been cool to have gone into and taken. I think that because now I'm trying to kind of learn all the like get a cert, a certificate to kind of learn all of the different areas, like the Security Plus is a pretty general base knowledge one that most beginning people in cyber want to get. So now I'm having to do that, which I probably would have done anyway, but it would have been nice to have had that option in school to kind of learned about that stuff.
Yeah, and even get the certification even. Yeah,
definitely cool.
Thank you for both of you sharing that. I think for me, especially since I sort of joined or decided I want to go in the tech industry late, would just have been getting earlier exposure to that and sort of been less stubborn with chemical engineering, because I definitely could have probably dropped it after the first half of my sophomore year, but I decided to finish up my sophomore year with it. And I think just having even just a semester head start would have made it a lot easier academically, but then also I would have been able to go into a little bit more depth and be a little bit more technically proficient coming out of college than during it. So I'd say that's probably my main thing. Socially, I felt like I was doing fine and like working with other people. Well, that concludes the third episode. Thank you, Ben Sklar, Jonathan Steward, for being my guests. I think we covered a lot of good topics and spread a lot of really useful information and advice for those people, around our age or even earlier. I just want to appreciate both of you guys for being on my podcast.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem.